Okay. So in Apex fundamentals, right? So what all we have seen so far, guys, right? So we have seen what programming is and how, so computer executes a particular program and all of that. So, and along with it, right? So we have seen what variables are, right? So we have started, so learning the building blocks of programming, right? So within that building blocks of programming, we have seen what variables are, right? So, and after that, right? So what more we have seen? So we have seen what data types are, right? So, and along with that, what more we have seen, right? So we have seen what is a statement and what is an expression within a program. Okay. So, and along with that, so we have seen all the operators, right? So how many types of operators we have, right? So assignment operator, and then
Arithmetic.
arithmetic operators, and then
Relational operators.
relational operators. Yes. Okay. Relational operators are used to compare two variables. Okay. Right. So, and after that,
Logical operators.
logical operators. Okay. So logical operators will give a Boolean output. Okay. So there also you can, right. So what you can do, right. So you can give two expressions, and if both the expressions are true, right. So, and if you are using, so and operator, right. So between those expressions, then you'll get true, right. If, so only if both expressions are false, then you'll get false if you are using OR operator. Okay. And if you are using not operator, then what will happen? Right. So it will just simply convert whatever expression that you have, right? So to, its opposite, right? So what is it? It's to its opposite value. Okay. So that's what, so we have in, right. So that's what generally that not operator does, right? So that's what it is, right? So, and after logical operators, what more operators that we have? Incremental and decremental operators, right? So these are the things that we have seen in our yesterday's class, right? So now let's look at conditional statements, right? So these are like how we have variables, right? Constants, data types, statements, expressions, and operators, right? So we have some other building blocks as well, right? So of a programming, right? So which are conditional statements, loops, and collections, right? So we'll see all of them as well, right? So now let's start with, right, conditional statements, right? So we have majorly 6 type of conditional statements that we generally use in our day-to-day life, within our Apex programming. Okay. So it starts with if, right? So, but before that, right, why do we need to use conditional statements, right? So that is what something we should know. Okay. So just give me a second, guys. So what is the necessity of conditional statements and why do we use them in any program? Okay. So we know, right? So program is a set of instructions, okay, that we give, that we give it to our computer to perform a particular task. Okay. So now, right, you have given a lot of instructions over here. Okay. So within all of these instructions, right, say for example, right, so you want some set of instructions not to execute, right? Or maybe to execute only if certain condition is met. Okay. So you have, right, so 10 instructions or whatever it could be, right? So 10 lines of code, or maybe 20 lines of code, right? Or 20 instructions or 30 instructions, whatever it is, right? So out of all of those instructions, only set of instructions, few set of instructions, you don't want them to, so you want them to execute only if they are satisfying certain conditions. Okay. So in that case, how can we achieve that, right? So we can achieve that with the help of conditional statements. Okay. So we can achieve that, only with the help of conditional statements, right? So for that, right, we have 6 varieties of conditional statements. Now let's look at all of them one by one. Okay. So majorly, right, so we generally use, so the first 3 conditional statements, and along with that switch also we'll use, right? But so you can use all the 6 type of conditional statements, depends upon the requirement that we have. Okay. So now let's look at that quickly. Okay. So say for example, right, you have 3 numbers. Okay. 3 numbers, right? So A, B, and C. Okay. So in A, right, so you have 5, right? In B, you have, 3, and C, you have, some 8 or something like that. Okay. So if you want to identify which number is a bigger number, how can we do that generally? Okay. So tell me so general way, right? How can we identify which number is greater?
A.
C is greater, right? 8 is the biggest number. Okay. How you are able to tell 8 is the biggest number? Okay. So you are doing some kind of calculation back in your mind, which is letting you know that this 8 is the biggest number. Okay. But if you have to find that out within the code, how can we do it? Right. So we can achieve that only through conditional statements. Okay. So now let's quickly see, right? So the first statement, which is if statement. Okay. So how a if statement, if conditional statement works. Okay. So right. So what I mean, so let's quickly see this. Okay. So what will happen is that, right? So you'll use if keyword, and along with that, right? So you will give your condition. Okay. So what you'll do, you'll give your condition. Okay. So if that particular condition is evaluating to true, okay. So then what we generally do is, right? So whatever piece of code that you want to execute, we will execute that code. Okay. So that is the significance of so if statement. Okay. So now let's quickly look at the same example, that whatever we have seen. Okay. So what do we have, right? So we have three numbers. A is equals to 5, B is equals to 3, and C is equals to 8. So if you want to identify which number is a bigger number, so then how we have to do is, right? So we have to use our if keyword, and after that, here you have to give your condition. What is this condition? This condition is nothing but an expression. Okay. So we know what is an expression, right? So an expression is something which evaluates to a particular value, and this expression should be, right, whatever expression that you are using within your right, so if statement, right? So that expression should be of type Boolean. Okay. Only Boolean expressions you have to give, right? So if that expression, right, so if that condition you can call that as condition expression as well. Okay. If the condition expression is evaluating to true, then whatever instructions or whatever statements or whatever piece of code that you are writing within your if block, right? So then right, so I mean, like, that particular code will execute. Okay. So if this condition is not matching, so then the whole block of code will not execute. Okay. So within your whole code, right? So if you are writing an if condition, right, somewhere, right, and you're so giving one expression here, right? So only if that particular condition is satisfied, right? So this piece of code, right, so will execute. Otherwise, right, so this piece of code will not execute, right? So all other code will get executed, but only this piece of code will execute only if and only if this particular condition is satisfied. And what is this condition, right? So this condition is nothing but an expression, right? So you'll just give an expression, and that too, what expression you'll give? You'll give a Boolean expression, right? So that means, right, whatever expression you are giving there, right, that expression should either give you a true or false value. Only if that expression is giving true as an output, then whatever lines of code that you are writing within your if block, right, so those lines will execute. Otherwise, right, so those lines will not execute. Okay. So now let's quickly see how can we write our condition to check, right, so which number is the greater number in our case. Okay. So how to do that then in that case? Can someone tell me? Okay. So we know A is equals to what? 5, B is equals to 3, and C is equals to 8. Okay. Now tell me, guys. Tell me. If A greater than B and A greater than C, then what will happen? Which number is the greater number? How can we identify? Right. So then we can say A is greater. Okay. System dot debug. Right. So A is greater. Right. So we can consider it like this. Okay. So and then what's next? How can we add the other blocks? How can we add other blocks? Tell me. The same thing, right? So how can we identify whether B is big or C is big, right? If we want to check that, right? So if B is greater than A, right? And B is greater than C, then what will happen, right? So B is bigger. Okay, system.debug, B is bigger, right? So that way you'll identify, right? So that B is the bigger one. Okay, so if you can write one more if as well, right? So if, right? So C is greater than A and C is greater than B, then what will happen, right? So then C is bigger. What have you done here? Okay, what have we done here, right? So it's the same thing, right? So the same thing, right? So block of code, tell me guys, block of code. So just, so let's look at that, right? So now what is it? What is the syntax? If, right? So condition, if that condition satisfies, right? Then block of code should execute, right? So whatever statements that you're writing, right? That is what we are doing here, right? So what we have done, right? So first we have taken one block, right? So, and I mean like, so one condition, right? So we are giving one expression here. What is that particular expression, right? So B greater than A and B greater than C, right? So if this is true and this is also true, then what will happen? The overall outcome will become as true, right? So then in that case, what will happen, right? So this particular block of code will get executed, right? So, and then what happens, right? So if C is greater than A and C is greater than B, so then what will happen, right? So then if both the conditions are true, then you'll get true as an output. Then this block of code will execute, right? So otherwise, what will happen, right? So this block of code will execute, right? So if A is greater than B and A is greater than C, then in that case, this block of code will execute, right? So this way, right? So what you can do is, right? You can just simply, write all of your conditions, and only if those conditions are met, so whatever code that you want to execute within, so that particular block, you can execute that code accordingly, right? Even if you change the values in, A, B, C, right? So then what will happen, right? Accordingly, right? So it will print whether A is the bigger one or the B is the bigger one or C is the bigger one. In this case, what will happen, right? A is equal to 5, B is equal to 3, and C is equal to 8, right? So first, right? So while executing the, that particular, so piece of code, right? All of these instructions, what, so our compiler will do, or what our Apex compiler will do, right? So it will start with, this first part, if block, right? So first it will come here and it will check, right? So is 5, I'm like, so is 5, sorry, not 5, right? So B, right? So is 3 greater than 5? No, right? It's false, right? Since it is false, what will happen, right? So the whole condition will become as the whole output of this particular condition will become as a false, right? So for that reason, so this block won't get executed, right? So, and then it will go to the next block, right? So in next block, what do we have, right? So C greater than A and C greater than B. That is what we are checking, right? So C greater than A and C greater than B means, right? So A is 8 greater than 5? Yes, right? So, and is 8 greater than 3? Yes, right? So then what will happen, right? So this particular piece of code will get executed and it will print that C is bigger. And then after that, what will happen, right? So this piece of code will get executed. And after that, what will happen, right? We'll go to the next line, right? So in this next line, what we are doing, right? We are again checking, right? Is A greater than B? A greater than B means, is 5 greater than 3? Yes, right? So this is yes. Then again, what we are checking is 5 greater than 8, right? So this is false, right? It's no, right? So this is false. Then what will happen, right? So since, right, so you have outcome as false, the overall outcome as false, right? So of this particular condition, then this piece of code will not execute, right? So only the code that we have, right? So in the middle will get executed, within the overall code that we have written. Okay. So if, and then we'll write the condition, right? If that condition satisfies, then whatever piece of code that we write within that block, right? So that piece of code will get executed. Otherwise, right? So the whole block will not execute. Okay. So in the overall code that what we are writing, right? So that piece of code will not execute if that condition is not satisfying. That is what this if is all about. Okay. So now right? How can we access our developer console, right? So click on this gear icon, click on developer console, then you'll go to your developer console, and this is where we'll write all of our code. Okay, so now let's quickly go to our anonymous window. Okay, so let me open our anonymous window. So what I'll do is I'll just simply comment all the code that we have written so far, and let's write that new code. Okay. Okay, right. Okay, right. So what can we do? Integer a equals to how much? 5 we have given, right? So, and then integer b equals to 6 or 3. Let's give 3. Okay, 3 we have given. And then what's next? What's the last one? Integer c equals to some 8 we have given. Okay, so not the commas, right? So we should use semicolons, right? 5 we have, 3 we have, and 8 we have, right? And what's next, right? So we can write if block here, right? If a greater than b and a greater than c. Okay, we are using operators. Which operators we are using over there? We are using relational operators. Okay, and along with this, we are using conditional operators as well, right? So this is one expression and this is one expression, right? And the whole thing is another expression. Okay, so this particular expression should evaluate to either true or false. If this whole expression or the condition is evaluating to true, then only whatever we are writing here, right? So that code will execute. Okay, so now let's do this, right? So system dot debug, what can we do, right? So a is bigger. Okay, so this is one thing. Okay, so and after that, what do we want to check, right? So we want to check it for b as well, right? So b greater than a and b greater than c. Okay, so if b is greater than both b and c, so both a and c, then what is it, right? So then b is bigger. Okay, so the same way, what we can do, right? So we can check it for c as well. Okay, so if c greater than a and c greater than b, so in that case, what will happen, right? So c is bigger. Okay, so now let's just execute this and see what will happen. Okay, so now tell me, right? So 5 3 8, so c will become the bigger one, right? So this block won't get executed, so it will start from here, right? The first line will get executed, second line will get executed, third line will get executed. In first line, right, we are associating, I mean, like we are assigning 5 to a. In the second line, we are assigning 3 to b, and in the third line, we are assigning 8 to c, right? So in fourth, I'm like, so in from fourth line, right, you know, so we are having one more block, right? So if I'm like, we're having one if block, right? So within this if block, right, so we are checking for our condition. If that condition is true, then this will execute. Otherwise, the whole block won't get executed and it will go to the next line of code. And then again, we have another block, right? So again, here also it will check. If that goes well, then it will execute. Otherwise, here also it will just simply skip this block of code. Then here it will check, right? If that is also true, then it will execute. Otherwise, even if this is also not true, then it will go out, it will come out of this, and whatever lines of code that you'll write, right? So after this, right, so all of those lines of code will get executed. Only if those conditions, if any of these conditions are true, then that particular piece of code will get executed, right? So now in this case, right, so the first block won't execute and the second block also won't execute. Only the third block will execute. Okay, so why? Because first block and second block, right, so conditions, whatever conditions that we are giving here, so those conditions are not evaluating to true. Okay, so now let me quickly execute and see what will happen. Okay, so c is bigger. Okay, so in our case, we clearly know that, right? You know, since 8 is the bigger than 3 and 5 now, so c has become bigger one, right? So now I'm like, so this particular block of code got executed, right? So and then now let's try changing this. Okay, so now let's try to you know, so make c as 1, and let's try to and let's execute this once again and now see what will happen. Okay, so now tell me what happened, right? So a is bigger. Why? Because, right, so only the first block got executed and all other blocks didn't execute it. Okay, so that's how an if. Good. So now let's look at if else. Okay, so now let's look at if else, right? So what is if else, right? How does this if else works, right? So this is also somewhat similar to if block, but the only difference is, right? So if that condition satisfies, right? So what we are currently doing, right? So now if that condition is satisfying, then we are executing whatever that we have written within that if block, right? So what if that condition is not satisfied, and if that condition is not satisfied and you want to execute some other code, okay? So in that case, we will go with if else. Okay, so right, so now right, so in the whole so code, right, so code of execution, right, so you have a lot of instructions, and within all of these instructions, right, so what you want to do is, right, so if any right, condition, right, if any if condition is not satisfying, right, and you want to execute some other case, in that case you want to execute some other piece of code, then we'll go with if else. Okay, first what it will do, it will check for this if condition. If that condition is true, then it will execute whatever code that we have written, right? So so it will after executing this, it will come out of the whole if else block, and after that, right, so whatever code that you have written, it will execute that. Okay, so if this condition satisfies, then it will execute whatever you have written in this, along with so all of these lines of code, it will execute this, and it will come out of the whole if else block. Whatever if else block that you have written, it will come out of that whole if else block, and after that, what it will do, right, so whatever you have written after that if else block, it will just simply start executing that. Okay, so if this condition is not satisfied, okay, so then what will happen, right? So if this condition is not satisfied, right, so then what it will do is, right, so in this whole execution, right, so what it will do is, right, so it will just simply so execute the first few lines of code, and after that, in this block, right, so it will not execute this piece of code, but it will execute whatever you have written in the else block, and then it will come out of that if else, and then whatever you have written after that, right, it will just simply execute after whatever you have given that. Okay, but now let's look at only this piece of block. Okay, so in this piece of block, right, so what all things that we have, right, so we'll have an if and condition, right? So if that condition matches, right, so whatever you have written, right, so it will execute. If the condition is not matching, right, so in that case, what will happen is that whatever you have written in the else statement, right, so that particular thing will be executed. So that's what if else is all about. Okay, so now let's now let's quickly look into the same example that whatever so we have just seen, right? So now let's look at the same example and see how can we convert that to if else, right? So instead of writing multiple ifs, right, so we can convert that into if else as well, right? So in our case, what is it, right? So we have 3 variables, right? So A is one variable, right? So and then B is one variable, right? So and then C is one variable, right? So A, B, C. Okay, so now, right, so what we are doing, right, so if A greater than B and A greater than C, right, so what we are checking, right, we are just simply what we are doing, right, so we are printing A is bigger. Okay, A is bigger. So see, else if not so A is bigger, so then what can we do is, right, so we can check right, so we can just simply say that, right, A is not bigger. We just want to check whether A is bigger or not. That's it. If that is our case, right, so what can we do? We can just simply say that A is not bigger. Okay, so we just want to check, right? That's it. Okay, we have 3 variables. We just want to check only if A is bigger or not. That's it, right? In that case, what can we do? We can just simply write it like this, right? So we'll just simply give whether A is greater than B and A is greater than C, right? So only if this is true, then we'll consider that A is bigger. Otherwise, right? So else A is not bigger, right? So this way also you can return, right? So this way you can so if since this so if this executes, this will get executed, this will get executes. Otherwise so whatever you have written in else, right, so only that particular thing will get executed in the right if else statement. Okay, so instead of considering 3 variables, let's consider only 2 variables. Okay, so A and B, And if you want to check, right, so whether A is big or B is big, so in that case, what can we do, right? So if, what can we do? If A is greater than B, then A is greater, right? So else what? Else B is greater. Okay. Is that right or wrong? Can we check it? Like, I mean, so can we try writing this? Can we? Okay. So now let's quickly see this, right? So we have 5, 3, 1. So now we are not checking, right? Which one is bigger out of those three numbers, right? So now let's check only for, so the first two numbers, right? So now A and B, right? So in that case, what can we do? Right? We can just simply write. So if A is greater than B, then A is bigger. Else, you don't need to write multiple ifs, right? So else, what can we do, right? System dot debug, right? B is bigger. Okay. Now let's try to execute this and see what will happen, right? So first condition will satisfy. So for that reason, this particular piece of code will execute, and this else block will not execute. And after that, right, so whatever you write, so that will also will get executed, right? So system dot debug, right after else block, what I'm writing, I'm just simply writing some piece of code, lines of code. What is this, right? So we know, so we have just executed if else block, something like this. Okay. So now what happens here, right? So it will just simply, so first line will get executed, second line will get executed. So it will come here, right? So since this condition is satisfying, A greater than B, it is evaluating to true, right? So this line of code will get executed, right? So this else block, since this if is already satisfied, right? So this else block won't get executed, right? So and then, so again, it will come out of it, right? So and then the system dot debug, whatever we have written here. So this one also will get executed, right? So now let me just simply click on execute and see what will happen. See, A is bigger. And then after that, we have just executed if else block. That is what the outcome that we are getting. Okay. So now let me open this anonymous window, right? So this is how if else block works. Okay. So the same way, so we have something called, right? So if else if. Okay. What is this if else if? Okay. So it's an extension of if else. That's it. Okay. It's just an extension of if else, right? So now let's quickly see what do we have within this if else block. Okay. So now, right. So if else if, so if else if, right? So now let's see what do we have in this. Okay. So first, what will happen is that, right? So you'll write if, right? You'll give your condition. If that condition satisfies, right? So whatever you have written in this, right? So that piece of code will get executed. So and then all the other block, right? So won't get executed. Okay. So if this condition is not satisfying, right? So in that case, what will happen is that, right, if condition is not satisfying, so then what will happen is that, right, so it will just simply skip this if block, and then it will come to this else block, right? So so and to this else, what we have added, right? So we have added one more if, right? So what we are doing, right? So if this is not happening, then please check for this condition as well. Okay. We are not just simply executing the else, right? So in if else, what will happen? We'll check, right? If that condition is satisfying. If that condition is not satisfying, then just simply execute whatever that was written in else. But in if else if, right, it won't work like that, right? So first we'll check for first condition. If that works fine, then that is good. If that is not going good, right, so then it will come. And for with in the else, we have written one more condition as well, right? So how can we write that, right? So by giving one more if here, right? So here what we are doing, right? So we are checking for one more condition. So then what will happen? It will check for that condition as well. And if that condition is satisfying, then this piece of code will execute, and all other, so piece of code won't get executed. So the first block won't get executed. Then the last block also won't get executed. But, even if in this case, even if this condition is also failing, so then what will happen is that, right? So it will come to the next block of code, right? So where we have if, right? So since this condition is also failed, so then whatever we have written in this last else block, right? So this particular piece of code will get executed. Okay. So that's how if else if works. Okay. So it will check for this condition. If this satisfies, right? So this will get executed. this will execute and all the other pieces of code won't get executed, right? If that condition is not satisfying, right? So then it will come and check again for another condition. So, and what will happen, right? So if that condition is satisfying, then it will execute whatever you have written in this, so else if block, right? So, and then the next piece of code won't get executed. But after that, right, after this block, whatever code that you write, so again, that code will be executed. But right, so even if this particular condition is also failing, so then what will happen, right? So since this failed, right, so even if this is also failing, then what will happen, right? So whatever that you have written in this else, right, only that piece of code will get executed, right? So that is what this if else if is all about. Okay, so now right, so let's quickly look at the same example, right? So the previous one, right? So A, B, C, right? So you have three numbers and you have to check which one is a greater one, right? So how can we do that? Let's go back to our developer console, right? So now let's just simply add integer C also here, and let's keep this as 8. Okay, so now let's try to have that if else if, right? Earlier what happened, right? We have written multiple ifs. Okay, so now let me just simply go back to the same code, right? So what happened here, right? So first when we wrote if condition, we have written 3 ifs, right? So separate ifs, right? So instead of writing 3 separate ifs, what can we do, right? So first we can check for whether A is greater than B and A is greater than C, right? If this condition is satisfying, A is bigger, else if, right? So then what can we do? Instead of writing another if, what can we do, right? We can write else if, right? So in this else if, what will happen, right? So if this condition is not satisfying, then it will check for this line of code, right? So and right, so it will check for this condition as well. If this condition is also failing, right? So then what can we do? We can just simply remove this extra if, and we can just simply write this else statement here. Okay, so then what will happen, right? So then if this is also failing, then it will come and execute this particular code. So then so see, since we can write 3 separate ifs, so what is the necessity of having, right? So if else if block. Okay, so the same thing can be achieved with 3 different ifs also, right? So that's what we have seen earlier. So then what is the point in having, right? So separate if block and else if block and all of that. So the reason why, because, right, so in the previous case, what's happening, right? So now right, so in the previous case, what is that happening, right? So we have 3 separate ifs, right? So in those 3 separate ifs, right, so what will happen, right? So it will check for this particular condition also, right? And after that, it will come and check for this condition also, and after that, it will come and check for this condition also, right? So since we have 3 conditions, right, so 3 times, right, so your compiler is checking one after the other. But here it will not work like that, right? So if the first condition satisfies, then what will happen, right? So the whole other block won't get executed, and it will not even check for whatever conditions that you have written, right? So then what happened, right? So these 2 lines of block, these 2 blocks are not even going for so validation check, right? So that means what will happen, right? So it will improve the efficiency, right? So it will improve the time that it takes to execute the whole code. Okay, so instead of writing multiple ifs, what you can do, right? So if you are writing if else, right, so only if this satisfies, then it will go to the next only if this is not satisfied, then it will go to the next condition, right? So only if both of them are not satisfied, then only it will execute whatever that we have written in the else block. But in the previous case, right, so it is checking for this one also, it is checking for this one also, it is checking for this one also, right? So now, right, so the execution time will be reduced if you are using multiple I mean, like, so if you're using else if, right, if else if. Okay, so that is the advantage of it, right? So now let's look at this, right? So what we have done, right? So first we have checked, right, if A is greater than B and A is greater than C. So now what will happen, right? So since 5 is greater than 3 and 5 is greater than 1, this piece of code will be executed, and whatever that we have written here, so this will not execute. Okay, so now if I change, right, so now so if I change the value, right, so in it, so then what will happen, right? If I'm making C as 8, then what will happen, right? So the first condition will fail, so that means this code won't be executed, right? So then it will come and check for second condition, right? So does the second condition is satisfying, right? So 3 is not bigger than 5, right? So that means this condition will fail. Okay, so and then what will happen, right? So then so directly it will come to the else block, and whatever we have written in the else, it will execute the else, right? So the same way, if I'm changing this to 8 and if I'm changing this to 3, so then what will happen, right? So the first if, I mean, like, so whatever you have written in the if, so that won't be executed. Why? Because the first condition is failing, right? So, and then it is checking for the second condition, right? So now the second condition is passing, right? So 8 is greater than 5 and 8 is greater than 6. So now this piece of code will be executed, and then this else block won't get executed. Why? Because only if this fails, then it should execute this last final else block. Okay. So now let's try executing this and see what will happen. Okay, what is it? B is bigger. Okay, so now let's try to change, some value here, right? So right, so instead of 5, so instead of 8, let's try to keep this as 1. Okay, so and let's try to execute this once again. So now what happened, right? So now A is bigger, right? So that's how we'll get, right? So now just simply go back and try to change this C to 8. So then what will you get, right? So you'll get C as bigger. Okay, C is bigger. Okay, C is bigger. So this is how the if block works, right? So now before so looking at the next conditional statement, right? So now let's quickly jump into our hands-on exercises and take few problems and try to solve them. Okay, so find the greatest number between two numbers. Okay, so this is something we just did, right? So you will have two variables, two integer variables, integer A and integer B, right? So we can just simply achieve that with the help of if A greater than B, print A is bigger, else print B is bigger, right? So that's it. Okay, we can achieve this with the help of simple if else block. Okay, so that is what the first one is all about, right? So now let's look at the second one. Okay, so given the age of 3 people, find the older guy and print his name and age. How can we do this, guys? Age of 3 people, find the older guy and print his name and age. So in that case, what we have to do, we have to take, right? So both the ages and the names of the people. Okay, so how can we do that, right? So integer, not integer, right? So first start with right, string. Okay, so string, right? So first guy name, right, equals to Ishwar. Okay, so the same way, string second guy name equals to, or let's keep it like this. Okay, second name equals to Rajesh, right? So string third name equals to Ramesh. Okay, right? So, and then what can we do, right? So integer first guy first name. Okay, so let's keep it like this. Okay, integer first name equals, not name, right? First guess age, right? So we want, right? So first age, let's just simply keep it like that, right? So see, why I'm just simply keeping it like this is because, right, so since we don't have much space, I am writing it like this. But otherwise, so please give some meaningful names. Okay, so first age, first guy age, okay, equals to 20, right? So the same way, second guy 25, right? So third guy 30 or something like that you'll get. So in this case, what can you do? You can just simply use the same if else block, right? So if first guy age greater than second guy age, and the same way, so first guy age greater than the third guy age, right? So in that case, what will happen, right? So that same thing you have to do, right? So the same way, like whatever right, so how we have done with so 3 numbers, the same way you have to do that between these 3 variables, right? So based on that, right, so if the first guy is older, right, so if the first guy is older guy, in that case, then what can you do, right? So you can print the first guy's name and along with that, so his age, and you can say that first guy is older. right? So, and then else you can write one more if, right? So within that if, you can write the other condition, right? We can check for, second guy, right? So is the second, second guy's age is greater than first guy age, and the same way second guy age is greater than third guy age, right? So in that case, right? So just simply print, right? So second guy's name Rajesh is older than both Ishwar and so third name, right? Govind or something like that. So you can write it like that. Okay. Else you can just simply say that, right? Since first guy and second guy are not older, right? You can just simply write, so third guy is older, right? So Govind is older than both Ishwar and Rajesh, right? So that's how you can achieve this particular functionality. Okay. So is it clear, guys? Is it clear? Or do you have any questions so far? Guys, please speak out now.
Clear అన్న.
మాట్లాడండి మరి మాట్లాడుకుంటే ఎట్లా? Okay, right. So please speak out. Okay, so who have left? Who have left? Sai Krishna left, and what about the other guy? Right, someone also left. Purushottam is also there. Robert is also there. So who left, guys? Okay, right. Let it be. Okay. So what is the third one, right? So determine students' final averages and indicate whether they have passed or failed. So the passing average is 50% for all the subjects. So how can we achieve this? How can we achieve this? Determine students' final averages and indicate whether they have passed or failed. The passing average is 50% for all the 6 subject. Okay. So now let's consider one of the student, right? So how can we do that? So let's come here, right? So let me just simply comment all of this code. Okay. So let's consider any student. Okay. So string student name equals to Sri Lekha. Okay. And then what is what I'm like, so what do we need to check after that? Okay. So integer, right? So how many subjects we generally have in schooling, right? So we'll have 6 subjects, right? So, right. So let's start with English, right? So English marks. Okay. How much we got? 30 or something. Okay. So 30 or 50, right? So 60. Okay. Let's keep it like this. Okay. And after that, integer. Tell me, guys, what more subjects we have? Telugu. Can we add Telugu as well? Okay. So 50. Okay. So integer, Hindi, all the languages I'm adding. Okay. So 70 or something like that. So, and after that, integer, maths marks. I'm not just giving marks here. Okay. Or else let me add marks everywhere. Okay. Okay. So what is it? Right. So math marks, right? So 94 or something like that. Okay. So integer, science marks equals to 100 or something like that. Okay. So and variable should never have spaces in between, buddy. So if you are giving a space, then what it will do, right? It will consider this as a variable, only student as a variable. Okay. So you should never have spaces and anything, so in the variables, please keep that in mind. So either you can use underscores, you can use, whatever it is, right? So numbers also you can use, right? So, but you should never have spaces in the variable names. Okay. And the variable should always start with an alphabet. Okay. So they should not start with numbers and all of that. So I believe we have already discussed this, right? So in the previous class, they should always start with an alphabet. They should not start with an underscore. Okay. And you can have underscores in between, but as a best practice, always, so Salesforce suggests to not use underscores. You can use them, but as a best practice, don't use them. That's what they'll say. Okay. So social, you can have like this as well. Okay. You can use social marks. Okay. You can have it like this as well. But as a best practice, don't use underscores. That's what they said. And there is one more thing, right? So in variables, follow the camel case as well, right? So start the first word with small letter, and the second word from second word onwards, start it with capital letter, so that you can identify if you are having multiple words. Okay. Social marks 60 or something. Okay. So now what we want to do, right? So we want to check whether he has passed or not. So in that case, what can we do? Right. So we want to bring the average of all the 6 subjects. How many subjects we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Right. So in that case, what can we do? Right. So average, right? So what will be the average in general? So it will be decimal, right? So 55.6 or 7 or something like that you'll get. Right. So that means it's a decimal. Okay. So decimal average, right? So equals to English marks plus Telugu marks plus Hindi marks plus what more we have, guys? Hindi marks plus maths marks plus science marks plus what is the last one? Social marks, right? Social marks and divided by 6, right?
100.
Divided by 100 or divided by 6? If you divided by 6, right? So that's when we'll get, right? So what is the average of all the 6 subjects? Okay. So for that, what can we do, right? So we can just simply keep all of this in a single, braces, right? And then divided by what? 6. Okay. So what will be the output, right? So you'll get, so what is the average of all the marks, right? So now how can we identify whether he has passed or not? Only if the cumulative average is more than 50, then we want to consider him like pass. Otherwise, he failed. Okay. If average greater than 50, then what do we want? 50.00. Since that is, so a decimal, right? So average is a decimal, we have to add, so points as well, right? So if, so it is more than 50, then what do we need to, right? So system dot debug. What is it? Tell me, guys. Student name, right? Right. So plus we can add one more string to it. Okay. So please better add some space bit before that, so that, right? So you'll get whatever name that we have for the student, that student's name you will get, and then you'll get a space, and after that you'll get, this passed also added to it. Else what can we do? Else student failed, student name, and then we can just simply say that, right? So they were failed. Okay. So can we try executing this and see what will be the output that we are getting here? Right. So what would be the output that we are getting here? Variable does not exist. Average. Average. AVERAG. Okay. So AVERAG. Yes. So now we have, and so there is a spelling mistake. That's why it said, right? Variable does not exist. Right. So now let's execute this. Method does not exist or incorrect signature void debug string. See, can you guys see this? And I have used EE, right? Instead of using DEBUG, right? I have used DEEBUG. That's a problem. Okay, now let's try to execute it once again and see what will happen. Is Sri Lanka passed or failed? Right, Sri Lanka passed. Okay, so this way you have to use just simple if, and based on that simple if, you can, so write whatever. Right, good. Okay. So now you want to check whether a given number is a positive number or a negative number. How can integer? Yeah, we got a number here. Okay. So you have something, within this, right? 5, 6 or -5 or 2 or whatever. Okay. 2, say greater than 0, right? That is the reason why you are saying this is a positive number. Okay. Right. So if any given number, right, if this is greater than 0, it's a positive number. If that is less than 0, then that's a negative number. Isn't it so? Right? if A greater than or equals to 0, let's use that equals to as well. Okay, so if A greater than or equals to 0, then what is it? It's a positive number. Okay, system.debug, A is a positive number. Okay, so else what? You can just simply write, so A is not a positive number. Is it clear, guys? Or do we have to add any other, else if block and all of that? Okay, it is asking whether it's a positive number or a negative number or a 0. So that means what we have to do? If A greater than 0, right? So then what is it? Positive. Okay. So else if A less than 0, then what is it? Negative. Okay. So else what can you do? A is 0. Yeah, that's it. A is 0. Right. So what we are doing, we are checking if A is greater than 0 or not. Right. So if you're giving 2 or something like that, then what will happen? Right. So since A 2 is greater than 0, this is the one that will get executed. So what if you are giving 0 here? So is 0 greater than 0? No. Else, then it will come to else and it will check for us. Is 0 less than 0? No. Then what will happen? So it will execute the else block. Right. So what do you have in the else block? A is 0. That is what you have in the else block. So automatically it will print A is 0. Okay, what if you have, so 1 in A? What if you have 1 in A, right? So A greater than 0. So 1 is greater than 0, right? You will get positive. Okay, so that's what it is, right? So what if, so we are giving, right? So A as -2 or something like that. Is A greater than 0? No, this won't get executed. So then what will happen? It will come and check for the second condition, right? Is A less than 0? Yes, this is the right. So then this will get executed and this will not execute. Okay, so the first 2 blocks won't get executed and the middle block, else if block, will be executed, right? So that's how this, what is it, right? So I mean, like, you can solve this particular problem. Okay. What about fifth problem, right? So here also you can, so try achieving it with the same if else block and all of that, but right, so we do have some other so type of conditional statements as well. Now let's quickly look into that. Okay, so what are they? Right, so we have something called nested if. So what is this nested if? Right, so nested if is nothing but within an if you want to write one more if, you can write that. That is what nested if is all about. Okay, so if, right, you have written one condition, and within this, if you want to, within this if block, if you want to write, multiple ifs, right? So then we call this as nested if. Okay, nested means what? Within one block, right? So we have another condition block, right? So if this satisfies, then it will go and again check for this particular condition. If this condition is also satisfying, then it will execute whatever you are writing, so within this particular block, right? So that's why we call it as a nested if, right? So in the nested if, what you can do, right? Again, you can write all of this if, right, your condition, right? And after that, right, so what you can do, right, you can have all the if else. Since you can write one more if within this, right? So what you can do, right, you can write else also here if you want to execute within this if block, right? You want to write one more else, right? So if and else, you can write it. And if you want to write one more if else if, you can write it. Okay, so that way within right, so either if or maybe, so else if, or maybe in else, right, if you want to have few more conditions, right, the same else if conditions, you can have it. Okay, so that's what nested if is all about. Let's take the same example. Okay, so this so which example, right? So 3 numbers example is there, right? So now let's take the same example. Okay, and see how can we use nested if instead of just simply if else. Now let's see how can we use that nested if. Okay, so if, right, so okay, so let's look at the same example that what we have seen earlier, right? So you have A, B, and C. Okay, so you want to check which number is a bigger number. So in that case, what can we do, right? So we have written regular so we have seen that how can we check that with the help of regular, so if, and the same way we have seen how can we achieve that with the help of if else if also, right? We have seen, right? So now let's see how can we check that with the help of what nested if as well. Okay, so if, right, so A greater than B, then what we want to check is, right, so we want to check whether A is greater than C or not as well. Okay, so in that case, what can we do? If, again, you can check this here, right? So if A is greater than C, right, so then print A is greater. Okay, so this way also you can write. Okay, so if A is greater than B, then go and check, right, if A is greater than C or not, right? So then if both the conditions are satisfying, then consider it like, so A is greater. Okay, so then, right, so else what can we do? Right, so else you can check this one as well, right? So else if, right, so you can just simply write it like this. Okay, just else. Okay, so else if, tell me, B greater than C. Okay, so in that case, what can we do? Right, so since A is not greater than B, so then what is it? Right, so that means right, so A is not greater than B. So in that case, now we can just simply check whether B is greater than C or not. So if B is greater than C, then what will happen? Right, so then you can just simply say like, so B is greater. That's it. Okay, you don't need to do anything. Right, so you can write some else here. Right, so else C is greater. Okay, so this one also will give us the same kind of output. Okay, so but the logic that you have written is little different. That's it. So what we have done, right, so first we have checked for whether A is greater than B or not, right? 8, right, 6, 5. Let's give it, let's so use these numbers. Okay, is 8 greater than 6? Tell me, guys, is 8 greater than 6? Yes, right? So then what will happen? It will go into this block of code, right? So within this block of code, what we have written, right? What we have written, right? So we have written, we are checking for one more condition. Is A greater than C? Is 8 greater than 5? Yes. So now this 8, this particular piece of code will be executed and all other lines of code will not execute, right? So why? Because this is the outermost if, and this is the, else of the outermost if, right? So that way, if you want to have, right, so any if within an if, or if you want to have any if within an else if, or if you want to have, any if, within the else, right, you can still be able to do that. Okay, so now let's quickly, so execute the same thing and see what will happen, right? So this is not a great example, but still, right, so this example, I would believe, so it is satisfying our requirement, right? So that means nested if means, right, you can have if the same if else blocks within any of the if else's. That's what this nested if means. Okay, so now let's just simply let me clear all of these drawings. Okay, let me go back to our developer console. Okay, so now let me just simply comment this. Okay, so let me go up. So let's look at the same example. Okay, so let me uncomment this. Okay, right. So now what can we do, right? So instead of writing the whole condition here, so we can still do that as well, right? So if A greater than B, then what can we do, right? So we can check one more condition here. So is A greater than C, right? So then print this. Okay, so within an if we have written one more if. That's what so this nested means. Okay, that's what this nesting means. Okay, so else if, right, instead of, so we don't need to write this, so else if, right? So we already know, right, A is not, if this is not satisfying, that means what, right? So A is not greater than B, right? So in that case, you don't need to check for this particular condition. You can directly check for a simple condition, which is B greater than C. So else if B greater than C, then B is the bigger, else just simply print C is the bigger. Okay, so you can so yeah, that's it, right? So else C is bigger, right? So let's try to execute the same thing and see what will happen, right? You will here also you'll get the same kind of output. Okay, but the only thing is what you have done, right? So we have brought that if condition into that existing if. That's it. Okay, now let me execute this. Oh my goodness, why nothing is coming up? Is 5 greater than 8? Sorry, is 5 greater than 1? Yes. 5 is greater than 1. Right. So now it is checking for one more if. Right. So is 5 greater than 8? No. Right. So this is coming out of this particular if. So, and after that, there is no lines of code. Right. So okay, right. So why it is not executing anything? Can someone tell me? Right? Why it is not, printing anything? So it's good that we are getting these kind of errors so that you will get to know what's happening. Right? So generally, what will happen? Tell me, guys. Right? So if this first condition is satisfying, then what will happen? Whatever you have written in the if block, only that thing will get executed, and all the other block won't get executed. Right? So that's what happening, right? So since 5 is greater than 1, right? So it is not considering the whole other blocks of code, and it is just simply trying to execute whatever we have just simply given in this particular block of code, right? So now this condition is also failing. So for that reason, the whole block didn't get executed. Okay. So that is the reason why it's no number is coming up over there. So in that case, what can we do? Right. So let's try to bring all of this into this if else. Okay. So then what can we do? Right. So we can just simply so write it like this. So first what's happening? Right. So it is checking if that so where is it? Yeah. So let me add one more. Yeah. So now first what it is checking, right? If A is greater than B or not, that is what it is checking. Is 5 greater than 1? Yes. So then what it is checking, right? So it is checking, right? So is 5 greater than 8 or not? Right? So this is not right. So then what's happening, right? So then it is not executing this block of code. Then it's going here, and it is trying to execute this block of code. Okay. So is 1 greater than 8? No. So 1 is not greater than 8. So then, right? So what's happening, right? This block of code is also not getting executed, right? So then what will happen, right? So then it will directly come to this else block, and whatever you have written in this else block, so it will just simply execute that particular else block, which is C is greater. Okay. Now just try to execute this and see what will happen. Now you will get the right output. See, C is bigger. So what we have done, right? It's the same example, but the only thing is, right? We have written all of this if else statements into this, existing if. So that's why we call this as nested if. Nested means, so the other if else blocks are, so being, nested into the existing, so if else statements. Okay. So this is what nested if is all about. And then let's go to switch. Okay. So if you are having, so if the logic is very, I mean, like if you have to check for, 10 conditions or 15 conditions or something like that. So then what will happen, right? So generally you have to write 10 if else, 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 and all of that. So then what will happen, right? So it will increase the number of lines of code that you're writing. Okay. And it is not easy to maintain as well, right? So for that case, right? So for that reason, right, we have one more, conditional statement that, so most of the programming languages use, which is switch. Okay. Which is what? Switch. So now let's quickly see how switch works. Okay. So let me, so show you the syntax of switch, right? So this is what the switch syntax, right? So switch on, you will give an expression here. Okay. What is this? You'll give an expression here. Okay. So it shouldn't be a Boolean expression. It can be of any expression. Okay. So expression means what, right? It will evaluate to a single value. Okay. That's what an expression is, right? So in general, if else and if, else if and all of that, right? So we will use Boolean expression, right? So it should give either true or false. If that is true, then only it will go to the next stage, right? So, and next stage, and will execute it, right? But in switches case, right, so it is not like that. Okay. So you can just simply give any type of expression that you want to give, but that expression should be should evaluate to a single value. Okay, so now right, so what will happen after that, right? Switch on expression you'll give, and after that you'll just simply give whatever block that you want to give, and within this, right, you will write, so there is something called when. Okay, so when whatever the output that you are expecting generally, okay, from this expression, okay, so that values that you have to give, right? So if when the value is 1, say for example, right, say for example, right, so we are expecting some 1 to 10, okay, so in this expression as an output. Okay, so if the output is 1, we want to print so 1. If the output is 2, we want to print 2. Right, so not the output, right? If the expression so output is coming as 2, then we want to print it as, then we want to print 2, right? If the expression's output is 3, then we want to print 3. If the expression's output is 4, we want to print 4, or something like that. Okay, so we want to print up to 10 or something like that. So in that case, what can we do, right? So we can just simply put switch, and then we can give the expression here, and then we have to use when keyword, and after that we have to give the number here. Okay, so and then what you'll do, you'll just simply write your logic here. Okay, so you'll use a small semicolon, and then you'll write your logic here. System dot debug, right? So debug, right? So one. Okay, so when 2, okay, system dot debug, okay, system dot debug, what is it, right? So 2. When 3, okay, then what, right? So system dot debug 3. Okay, so that way, right, so you can add all of your whens or all of your cases, right? So this is generally called a switch case as well. We generally call that as switch case and switch when, right? So whichever way, with whichever name you want to call it, you can call it that. Okay, switch case, you can call it as switch case, and you can call it as switch when as well. Okay, switch when also. Okay, either you can just simply keep it as when, or you can keep it as case also. You can use either keywords, either when or either what is it, right? So switch also. Okay, so what if, right? So what if the expression that you are giving here, right? So what if the value that is coming out of this expression is not matching any values that you have given so before your when, that you have given so to your when statement, right? So then in that case, what will happen is that, right, you can write one more thing which is called as when else. Okay, so within the same thing, you can write one more thing that is called as when else, right? So let's quickly see that. Okay, so now, right, so what I've just told you, right? So if no so case is satisfied, right? So if no right, so whatever things that you have given, right, so the output that you are coming out, that is coming out of this expression, is not matching any of the values that you have given with these when statements, then what can you do, right? So if you want to right, so execute some other thing, so then what can you do is you can just simply write one more when, and you can have something called else added to it. Okay, so now let me just simply so make it little more compacted, so that we can keep everything over here. Okay, so now let me just simply write this. Just give me a second, guys. Okay, so when 2, okay, so print, I'm just simply writing it like this, okay, for our understanding. Print 2. Okay, when 3, print 3. Okay, so when 4, print 4. Okay, so if nothing is satisfying, then what will happen, right? So then you want to execute something. So in that case, when, you will write something called else. Okay, when else, right? So I mean, like, so if the output that you are getting out of this expression is not matching any of the values, right, so that you have with your when, right? So in that case, what will happen is that, so this else, right, whatever you have written in this else, that else will be executed. Okay, so that's how the switch statement works, right? So switch when or switch case, whatever you want to call it, or just simply switch, right? You can call it that way, and this way it will work. Okay, so now if you are giving right, so 1 to 4, then what will happen, right? So in this case, right, if you look at the same example, right, if you are giving 1, right, so into your expression, then this particular thing will be executed. If you are giving 2, then what will happen, right? So this will not execute, and only this thing will be executed. If you are giving 3, so this will not execute, right? So and only this particular thing will be executed. If you are giving 4, this will not get executed, and only this particular thing will get executed, right? So if you are giving 5 or something like that, then what will happen? Right? It is not satisfying any value that you have given in all of your whens. So that means, right, so it will not execute anything, and whatever you have given within this else, right, so that particular thing will be executed, right? Anything, right? 5, 6, or something, right? Instead of these numbers, if you are giving some ABC, or maybe so XYZ, or whatever it could be, right? If this expression is evaluating to ABC, XYZ, or whatever it could be, in that case, what will happen? It will just simply, right, so not execute anything, right? And it will just simply execute whatever you have written in the else statement. Okay, so that's how a switch case works. Okay, so now let's quickly so check any of the problems, right? Now let's quickly look into any of the hands-on. Now let's quickly look into that. Okay, so now let's look at one of the examples, right? 1 or 2 examples, then you'll get a clear understanding of it. But this is the syntax of it. Okay, so now let's quickly clear all the drawings and just simply go back, right? So to our platform. Okay, so right, so now let's quickly see this, right? So based on the position of an individual stood in a race, give them the right medal. Okay, if he stood, I mean, like if he stood right, so in the first position, right, so give him the gold medal. If he stood in the second position, give him the silver medal. If he stood in the third position, right, so give him the bronze medal. So any other position, 1 no medal, right? This is what you want to print. Okay, so now let's just try to so execute this, right? So just simply check this, right? First position means gold medal, second position means silver medal, third position means bronze medal. Any other position, 1 no medal. That is what we want to give, right? So this can be achieved with the help of if else as well, and so we can achieve this with the help of switch as well, right? So now let's try to achieve that with the help of switch. Okay, so position stood. Okay, so string, let me add a string, right? So string position, or maybe like let's keep this as integer. Okay, so integer position, right? So position in race. Okay, so what is the position, right? So let me give first position or something like that. So, and after that, what I've told you, right? So if that is first, we have to give it as first. I mean, we have to give them gold medal. If that is 2, we have to give them silver. If that is 3, we have to give them bronze, right? So any other position, we should just simply tell them you have 1 no medal. Okay, so then in that case, what can we do? Let's try to use that switch here. Okay, so how can we use switch, right? So switch, right? So on what? Switch on, we have to give an expression. That's what I've told you, right? You have to give an expression here. So switch on, what is that expression? You can give any expression. In this case, either you can just simply give a simple variable as well. Whatever you want to give, you can give that here. That's it. Okay, switch on position in race. So what is the value that we are giving here? 1, right? So that means switch on, right? So this position in race, right? So whatever value that is coming into this, right? Based on that value, we want to execute whatever we want. I mean, so whichever so block of code we want to execute, we can execute that block of code, right? So in this case, what I'll do, right? So when 1, what do you want to do? When 1, system.debug. What is it? Tell me, guys. System.debug. You won gold medal. Okay, so right, you can just simply write all of that in a single line, or you can just simply write it in multiple lines also, right? So whichever way that is suitable for you, you can write it like that. When the position in race is 2, right? So then what should we do? Okay, tell me, guys. System.debug, you have 1 silver medal. When 3, what is it? But that is the best practice to follow. Okay, so when 3, what is it? System.debug, you won. What is that last one? Okay, you won bronze medal. Okay, bronze medal. Okay, so else, right? If nothing is so I'm like, if the position is not first position or second position or third position, then what will happen, right? So when 4, not 4, right? So when else, right? So else, if nothing, right? So is satisfying in that case, when else, right? So system dot debug, right? So you won no medal. Okay. All right. Okay. So let me just execute this and see what will happen. Okay. So we have given 1 in the right. So for this position in race, right? So this is the expression, right? So either you can directly give it like this as well, right? So instead of giving it here, right? So you can directly give that, so within what simple braces also, you can give the whole thing as an expression. Okay. So that will also work. Okay. So integer position, you can declare it here, and then, right. So you can just simply give, so position equals to 1, right? So like this also you can give. Okay. So like this also you can give. Why? Because this is an expression. Okay. So like this also you can give, or else you can directly just simply write it like this as well. Okay. So the final thing also you can directly write it here. When the position in race equals to 1, then it should be you won gold medal, right? So you won, otherwise silver medal, otherwise, so you won no medal, right? Let's execute this and see what will be the output. Extra column at line 172. Reason why? Because, right, the problem is, right, so we have used what? This colon here. So in so in Apex generally, right, so we don't, it will not take this colon, right? So in some other programming languages, it will take this colon. Okay. So I'm just simply removing this column. That's it. Okay. When the output is 1, then this is the one that we want to execute. When the output is 2, this is the one that we want to execute. When the output is 3, this is the one that we want to execute. When so this expression is not matching any of these outputs, then this is the one that we want to execute, right? So now let me just simply execute and see what will happen, right? Debug only, right? So you won no medal. Why you won no medal? Why you won no medal? Why? Because in position in race, what is the value that we have in here? Tell me, can someone tell me? We have no value, right? So we have null value. That means, right? So this is not satisfying this. It is not satisfying this. It is not satisfying this. For that reason, right? So whatever we have written in this else, that particular thing got executed, and it is saying that, right? So you have won no medal. Okay. So now let's quickly, try to, add some value over here, right? So position equals to 1, right? So now let's see what will happen, right? So now this particular piece of code should be executing. Now let's try to execute this and see what will happen, right? So debug only. Now see, you won gold medal. Okay. So that's how this switch statement works. But now, right, so you have asked one more question, right? So what is it? What is it? Who is that? Right. So Nagraj, right? So can this work without, what is it? Without this flower braces, right? So curly braces, that is what you have asked, right? So let's quickly check that, right? So whether this will work or not, right? So generally, right, it should work, right? So if you are not having multiple lines of code, right? So in that case, it will work. Otherwise, right, so it shouldn't be working. Okay. So in our case, right, so we have only one single line of code, right? So now let's check, right? So if that works or not. Okay. So now let's try to execute this and see what will happen, right? So see, it is saying that missing that curly brace. So that means you should have that. So this is what it is, right? So let me just simply show it once, right? Switch on, this is the keyword that you have to use. And after that, you have to give expression, right? So whatever output that you are getting out of that expression. So if that output is matching with any of the values that are there before our when block, right? So only that particular piece of block will be executed, right? So if that is not matching, right, whatever output that you got from this expression, right? So if that output is not matching with any of the values that you have given before your whens, then whatever you have written within your else block, only that particular else block will be executed, right? So this is what switch when is all about. Okay. So now let's quickly look at one more hands-on exercise, right? What is this? Calculate the overall CTC, salary plus bonus, of an individual after the bonus based on the below salary slabs. What it is saying, calculate the overall CTC. CTC means cost to company, right? So of an individual after the bonus based on the below salary slabs. Now let's quickly look at what all slabs that we have here. Okay. So when the salary is above 15 lakhs, then bonus should be 15%. Okay. So when the salary is between 12 lakhs and 15 lakhs, then the bonus should be 12%. When the salary is between 10 lakhs and 12 lakhs, then the bonus should be 10%. Right. So now what will happen? Right. So whatever salary that we are getting here, right? So we have to add that salary to the bonus, right? So 15% of the bonus, and then, right? So we have to display the final output, which is CTC. Okay. So now let's try to execute that. So, but before going it, right, let's quickly look at the solution, right? How can this be achieved? Okay. So now let's quickly see this. Okay. Integer or decimal, what should we use for the salary? Integer, salary, right? So equals to something, right? So 15 lakhs or something like that. Let's keep it like this. Okay. So, and then, so switch on, right? What can we do? Switch on. Tell me, guys. Switch on salary. Can we do the switch on salary? Or else we have to do it somewhere, right? So we should not be doing that switch on salary. Okay. So let's do one thing. Okay. So let's quickly do this, right? So if, right? So 1 second. So, okay. If salary, right? So greater than 15 lakhs. Okay. So what is the slab, right? So then slab equals to, right? So bonus slab or whatever it could be, right? So you can write it like that. Okay. So bonus equals to, where is it? Right. So bonus equals to how much? Tell me, guys. Bonus equals to
15%.
15%. Okay. So let's just simply keep it like this. Okay. So 15% or whatever it could be, or else what can we do? Right. Just try to, so achieve this, achieve this with the simple if else block, and, so try to achieve this with the when block as well by yourselves. This one. Okay. So now let me go to the 7th one. Okay. So display the name of the month when month number is given as input. Okay. What is it? Display the name of the month when month number is given as input. Tell me what will happen. How can we do this? Switch on, right? So you can give the month number. Okay. So month integer, right? So integer month number, right? So integer month number, right? So equals to 5 or 6 or whatever it could be. You want to take it, you can take it, right? So switch on month number. Tell me, guys, what will happen here, right? So here we can just simply write all of our when statements. When 1, what is it? When it is 1, system.debug January. Okay. So when it is 2, system.debug February. When it is 3, system.debug March, right? The same way, right? So when, right, so it is 12 December. Okay. So when else, right? If the number that has been given is, not between 1 to 12, then what should we do, right? So we should just simply tell them that, so wrong month number. Okay. System.debug wrong month number. You can give it like that. Okay. With this, right? So now, so all of, the conditional statements, I mean, like we are done with all the conditional statements. There is something called ternary operator, right? So in the conditional statements, the ternary operator we'll see in our tomorrow's class. Okay. So, but till then, so what I want you to do is just go through all the recordings that, not the recordings, so all the, so topics that we have discussed today, and please complete the hands-on for tomorrow. Okay.